Welcome to the Niche Pursuits podcast. Today we're joined by Thomas Jepsen, and he joins us to talk about all things technical on websites. If you love the technical aspects of ranking a site, today is your episode. And if you struggle with it, you might want to listen in because Thomas has a lot of knowledge on this topic. We get into the nitty gritty and he doesn't hold back. He's got a lot of opinions and he's seen a lot in his SEO auditing when he does technical audits of websites. We talk about AI, thin content, and what he sees happening with content that is tagged as bad by Google. We talk about indexation, site bloat, how to get through indexation problems. I really ask him detailed questions about some of those technical terms we see in Google Search Console as it relates to your website and problems or errors that it flags. We talk about how to handle it and how to fix these problems going forward. We get into category pages, no indexing, deleting content. He gives a fantastic framework for when to delete, when to update, and when to optimize. We talk about schema. We talk about topical authority. He's got some strong opinions about that. We talk about internal linking. So anyways, just such a deep dive into the things that go on with Google crawling your site, what they look for, what they want, and what they want to see you doing to make sure that your content can be ranked and that you can start to get traffic from it. Hope you enjoy. Before we jump into the podcast, I wanted to let you know that today's episode is sponsored by Search Intelligence. Here's a short clip of Ferry from Search Intelligence showing you how their agency built digital PR links to a client's website.
What a masterpiece PR link building campaign. With 20 links in big publications such as The Sun, Express, Mirror, Wales Online, and still landing, I would say this campaign is a massive success. We told the press that people should turn on their heating this summer if they want to save money next winter. And we landed over 20 links in national and regional UK publications for our boiler client. That's crazy. The campaign hook was pretty clever. It is a known fact, at least in the boiler trade, that if you keep your boiler off for many months, it might rust and it might get you into trouble if you keep it turned off from spring to next winter. We therefore advise the press, with an expert commentary piece, on behalf of our boiler client, that people should turn on their boilers this summer just when the heat wave is in full swing. This way they can avoid a boiler failure next winter and save money. Massive publications picked up our story, including The Sun, Express, Mirror, Wales Online, and a few more dozen publications, giving our client links, lots of links, and lots of happiness hormones. No wonder that so many journalists covered our story, as this headline is a massive link magnet to their audience. This case study highlights the fact that a clever hook can be applied to any insight or story to make a campaign more successful and more compelling to journalists. Can you imagine when people see this headline in the news, "You should turn on your boiler this summer"? There's no way they would not click on it. I would click on it. So this was the hook, and this is why this campaign was so successful. I hope this video inspires and shows you what's possible with a clever hook.
If you want similar link building PR campaigns for your website, head to search-intelligence.co.uk and get in touch with them now. All right, welcome back to the Niche Pursuits podcast. My name is Jared Bauman. Today we're joined by Thomas Jepsen. Thomas, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
It is going to be a good day. We're going to get really deep into the technical aspects of websites. I have been looking forward to this one for a while. You and I have connected on Twitter, and I've been following along with your technical know-how and deep dive. So I'm just going to pepper you with questions today, and I'm excited to learn from you. Why don't you, before we get into all the technical stuff that you do right now, why don't you give us some backstory on who you are and kind of your history in websites?
Sure. I was pretty bored in high school, 17, 18 years old kind of thing, and somehow ended up doing surveys online, found out that that was not a great way to make money. Somehow ended up coming across SEO and started building websites, ended up ranking kind of bottom of page one for memory foam mattress toppers, and was generating some AdSense revenue back in the time when AdSense was really the thing to do. Moved from Belgium, where I grew up, to Denmark, got a job in a online marketing agency while I was also in school at the same time. Started putting up a lead gen site in home improvement, so people would come to my site and then they'd put in their contact information and say what kind of home improvement project it is that they wanted, and then I would sell that information to partners like Networks and Home Advisor, and got my master's and basically moved over to the US about 2 months or so after I graduated, and had my site that was doing about 21,000 a month in revenue all of a sudden fall by 85% overnight, basically. And so that was kind of juggling that. I'd just gotten my visa, which was tied to my company. So all of a sudden, I'm in a significantly different financial situation. Raised some money for VC, got my green card, kind of recovered that site, ended up selling it profitably, got some money out of that, and raised money for a different project, and kind of working on some different stuff now and doing SEO audits. But basically, I've been doing SEO to some extent for about 12 years now.
You have, quite the layered history there. I mean, you've worked in the mattress field, which is a known difficult field to work websites through. And if you don't know those stories, they're readily available online. You've worked in lead gen, which is fascinating, and you paint a clear picture. When I think of kind of the prime model of lead gen and selling leads, Home Advisor does come to mind, and Angie, what was Angie's List, and now Angie, and these kind of projects. You've worked with large sites going up and large sites going down, and then you've sold a site, and you've raised several rounds of VC. Boy, you're quite the well-rounded gentleman.
Well, thank you.
What became the focus for you on auditing sites, like the technical know-how of websites? When did that develop? Because that's what you're kind of doing right now.
For one, I can't deny that the money is obviously appealing, but I've just looked at so many different websites, and for the longest time, we're all trying to reverse engineer what's going on and what's working and stuff. I can say that my Screaming Frog folder, where I save all my Screaming Frog files, is north of 1,000 different domains by now. So I try and look for the patterns and figure out what could Google be doing. And one thing is what they're saying, but another thing is actually what they're rewarding. And some natural level of curiosity, and then I saw that SEO was kind of taking off on Twitter, and I decided to join that rat race. And then it kind of just followed very naturally to also start auditing sites, and that's kind of how I came about it.
It is funny how once you kind of put your mark down as something that you do, it kind of just follows you. One day, my background is in photography. I was a professional photographer and ran several companies there. And then, one day on Twitter in the SEO community, I kind of told the world that I have this background in photography. And lo and behold, a year later, I'm kind of the photo guy on
Nice.
SEO Twitter,
Yeah.
which is fine. I like it, but I kind of left that behind me. Hey, so before I start just picking your brain on technical stuff, maybe walk us back to that website you had that you said was earning over $20,000 a month, took a huge hit. You recovered it somewhat. Like, what were the problems with that site? And then maybe just give us a story on how you recovered it and got it to the point of what you sold it for.
Yeah, funny little side note is, so I was writing my master thesis at the same time, and I was also working at PricewaterhouseCoopers. Guess I left that little part out, doing online marketing for them. And I had that contract with them, which was time limited. It kind of ran its course, and my own website was taking off. And I found out that getting a visa as an entrepreneur was actually a possibility. So I kind of just let that run its course. then my graduate professor who was supervising my thesis, he looked at me after I defended. He says, Thomas, this is bad. It's really bad. I can either barely pass you, or I can let you have a second go at it. And in my mind, I'm like, I have a very profitable asset, and I'm not super keen on the whole school thing. I mean, I did okay. It just was never really a thing that really got me excited. But to talk about like the technical stuff behind it, I think the QA I was significantly less good at that point, and I'd hired a guy who had a small team of writers, and so I put a lot of trust in this guy and basically didn't do my own QA on the content that came out, and it passed copy escape. But I found out when the site fell that they've basically just been swapping words out of existing articles and put them in. And since it had passed copy escape, the guy that I trusted, he hadn't, nothing had stuck out to him either. And on top of that, I think I also just had a problem with bad links. So it was kind of everything came together, and Google said we're not having this anymore. And so I basically cut. I want to say it was about 2/3 of the websites. Had a bunch of it had a bunch of it just rewritten, and what else did I do? I disavowed a bunch, tried getting rid of the links that I could, and I had a manual penalty lifted, and then the whole VC route. The intention was basically acquiring different sites and merging them into that one, and then making it a Home Advisor competitor and selling it off, and it never really necessarily fit the thesis of the VC, and so we ended up figuring out that selling was probably the route to take, and then we went. Well, I was working with one of the guys there, heading out from it, but we sold the site for 300 grand. So
Okay.
it wasn't quite the private jet money that I was hoping for, but it was still a nice little accomplishment, and I took some home, and they took a little bit home also.
Yeah, not Lambo money, but still a win and a success, and you can move on from.
We all just want Lambo money, right?
I don't know if I'd spend mine on a Lambo, but I like the idea of Lambo money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, congratulations. That's still a win, right? And probably leads nicely into what we're talking about today. So, I mean, let's set the stage for websites and ranking in Google today. We're doing this recording as we approach kind of mid 2023. 2022 is a landmark year of updates and different types of updates. But Google in general is still really a search engine, a crawl bot, and a bunch of ones and zeros, really. So bring us up to speed on some of the things to set us off on our course today. Some of the things that you're seeing in your audits that are consistent problems with websites, and then we'll use that to kind of dovetail into a bunch of subtopics.
Sure. So my thesis is basically the last year and a half-ish has really, for Google, been the preparation for this whole AI thing. And I mean, I'm the first guy to say I'm tired of hearing about AI, but I also think they've had to be honest about it in terms of just how they handle resources. So from the standpoint of having to basically process anything that you and I and everyone else with a website says needs to be indexed, they've had to figure out to a much larger extent than previously what is quality and how can we ensure that we don't get repetitions of conch house. And I mean, that wasn't even AI, that was just a bunch of scraping and a site that came up. But I believe that especially, May in particular, there were a bunch of sites that were hit. and December was also a big one. But I really believe that what's been going on with these updates has just been like, how do we make sure we're not just floating bad AI content to the entire internet? So there's been a lot of sites have been punished that probably shouldn't have been, but if I think they've been stepping up their game in terms of what they believe is quality content, which also means I actually think now is a good time to be a white hat SEO. But to answer your question of what I commonly see in audits, I mean, honestly, it's a bunch of stuff. There's still a lot of. I'm still a big believer in the disavow file. I know that Google's come out and said you probably don't need to disavow, but let's remember that the verbiage on the disavow page has not changed. It still says if you've been doing dodgy things, you should. So it still has that cautious language around it on the page. I mean, generally speaking, I still see websites coming to me that just miss the mark in terms of quality. And it's a broad thing, but we all like to think that our websites are great, but when you start comparing it to the competition, it's like they may have large portions of very thin content, or they may have decent content, but it's like the grammar just isn't there. And in the world of like a lot of just small compounding things, Google's still trying to surface the best stuff. And if you have bad grammar and you have bad structure and you have a lot of thin content, and maybe you have some bad links from someone you worked with in the past and you totally forgot about it. It's like these things just compound, and eventually Google says enough is enough. So I see large sections of websites that I don't think should be indexed just because they drag down the average quality of the overall website. So it's kind of broad, the things that I see being wrong with websites coming to me.
Something you said, and I thought maybe I'd get your opinion on it and drawing a line between it. So you talked about AI content. You talked, obviously we have to touch on AI, comes up all the time now, but you talked about AI content, thin content, AI generated content, yet we have had Google come out and say, hey, AI is okay, it's fine. So what is the line between what I'll use in air quotes as AI content and then bad content? Because in theory, it seems like Google wants to reward good content irregardless of if it's generated by AI or not. But in practice, AI content without additional work on it can be looked at as thin, repetitive, and bad. So help people understand, like, is there a line? Are you starting to see a line in your audits and in the way that Google is interpreting AI versus bad content?
I think it's important to remember what Google specifically said. They said if you're just publishing content with the intention of saving money and just publishing, cheap content and have that be what you're doing, then that's bad. I think in part what Google is trying to do is trying to avoid getting sued. So they're saying, we allow AI content for as long as it's good content. But I mean, don't tell me you're generating AI content because it's or like to avoid. I mean, everyone's doing it to save money. At the root of the cause, everyone using AI content is trying to save money. These are sophisticated language models trained on content. So, I mean, by far and large, they're just going to be repeating what's already out there. And, I mean, to this point, I I still think even when I have it generate anything and I try and fact check it, it still just comes out wrong way too often. So if you can argue that I mean I want to speak to the people that use AI content not for the sake of saving money, and I just don't believe that's generally the case. So I think Google just penalizes for AI content, but and I for a period of time I tried kind of telling that story that I from a risk management perspective I don't think it's a good idea to do extensively, but everyone else is encouraging it. So if if their site falls and they come to me and I make money off of it, I'm gonna be happy. I mean, I hope no one's site falls. It sucks having to recover it, but I'm kind of I'm kind of tired of trying to tell people I don't think it's a good idea.
Yeah, it's funny. I tell my client, I run a marketing agency for a day job, and I tell my clients a lot of times the term I use or the phrase I use, it works until it doesn't.
Yeah.
And, like a lot of the times what we're seeing right now isn't necessarily indicative of what's going to work down the road. And, Google's been obviously all the way back to Panda and Penguin updates has been changing the way that they let the algorithm interpret things. So maybe let's zero in on this, okay? Like, give me, if you can, some bullet points. What is bad content to a bot, to a Google bot? Like, what are things that you can do to your website that trigger the bot for bad content?
So I like to, I mean, the easiest answer is I like to look at sites that don't have a lot of authority, and people are gonna hate me for saying DR is a measure of authority, but I believe it's about the best proxy that we have. So I like to look at sites that have low DR and high traffic, and a bunch of the case studies I publish on my Twitter go off of that exactly. But going off of that, whenever doing keyword research, I like to structure content off of what is the lowest authority site that is ranking for the keyword I'm trying to target, because Google has already declared that this site is obviously doing whatever the algorithms are rewarding. So might as well just try and, I mean, not copy word for word, but like structurally try and copy what they're doing, because they're clearly hitting the intent of the keyword. But I mean, stuff like basically writing so that you're likely to pick up the feature snippet, I think is a good idea. You want to make it as easy as possible for the bot to actually understand what your content's about. So if at the bottom of your site you have very vague verbiage that answers the H1 of the page title, Google has to spend more resources to actually figure out whether or not you actually answered the search query. And the same, I mean, it's no different from the user. They'll have to scroll down and figure out, like, where's the answer even to this question. So from a higher level, make it as easy as possible for Google to understand, what search intent are you trying to answer, and then follow the people in the industry that are getting the best results with the least authority.
And so almost model your content off of these low DR, high traffic websites, which you can find, in an Ahrefs or a SEMrush or these kind of tools. What if, there's been talk that with AI, a lot of the low competition and low authority or low competition keywords will start to be infiltrated with kind of some AI stuff. What can someone do to stand out from an AI approach and make their website sustain and, kind of survive updates going forward?
I still believe that Google is going to penalize sites that they see as being mainly AI. But to answer your question, the higher the proportion of stuff that Google doesn't believe is AI, I think the better off you are. People are talking about, a bigger brand component to a site. I think that's a very valid point. Ideally, if you can focus on and figure out angles that are more likely to have you actually get natural links to the site, I think that would be a very important component of it. In my opinion, this is just stuff that the AI is going to have a hard time replicating anyway, because if you can include stats, and if you can include user surveys and this sort of stuff, then that's also stuff that someone might be more inclined to actually linking to. And Google is still very link driven. Whether or not that necessarily at scale applies to low competition keywords is a little bit hard to say. But my belief is still that even if a site puts up 1 million pages on low competition keywords, they're just, at some point it works until it doesn't, and then they get penalized, and then it's still going to be the human written responses that are going to show up at the top.
Very good. Good. Before we jump into the podcast, I wanted to let you know that today's episode is sponsored by Search Intelligence. Here's a short clip of Ferry from Search Intelligence showing you how their agency built digital PR links to a client's website.
What a crazy campaign. How to sleep on your back. This campaign got us links in Huffington Post, Glamour magazine, Mirror, and lots of other great news publications. Let me show you how we've done it. It was so simple. Our sleep client provided us with expert commentary about how to train yourself to fall asleep on your back. They also gave advice on why it's best to sleep on your back. Once we've had this information, we went to Muckrack and searched for journalists that consistently write about sleep and well-being. We've sent these journalists the advice provided by the client, and within 1 day the links started flowing in. Glamour magazine, a DR81 website, picked it up. Huffington Post, DR88, Mirror UK, DR90, a massive avalanche of links blasted through our client's website with this simple yet effective campaign about how to sleep on your back. I hope this inspires, and I hope you'll use this technique to land massive links to your or your client's website.
If you want similar link building PR campaigns for your website, head to search-intelligence.co.uk and get in touch with them now. You said something earlier, this will be a bit of a transition, but you talked earlier about indexation and about bloat. And so let's talk about that topic because I'm sure that comes up a decent amount in your site audits. Maybe give the listeners a little bit of an overview about what you mean when you're talking about a website having poor indexation, the signs to see that, what it looks like to have bloat, why it's bad. Maybe let's just take it from the top, and then we'll kind of deep dive the topic.
Yeah, sure. I feel especially starting last year, everyone started complaining about having indexing issues on their site, and I can say I've never had indexing issues. I submit anything in Search Console, and within 3 hours it shows up as indexed. It shows up, so basically, usually it within 3-4 minutes maybe it shows up as crawled, and then within about 3-4 hours, 2-3-4 hours, kind of depending, it shows up as indexed. But I think it's a counter AI measure that they have to spend significantly more resources if a site suddenly puts up 1 million pages. I believe that if you try and make sure that you only have indexable on your website what you believe actually should be generating clicks from Google, and you're putting in the necessary quality, you're editing, you're you're running it through something like Grammarly, and then over time Google learns that the average quality of your content is fairly high, and then they reward you with also pretty rapid indexing. I mean, common issues I usually see is stuff like category pages that are indexed, tag pages that are indexed. Can be stuff like missing canonical tags that all of a sudden mean that Google are treating, well, literally 100% duplicate content as individual URLs. All of this, so these pages that I believe should be no indexed because they don't add much for if a user find them in search. I believe that they should be no index so that you show Google some level of consideration towards the resources that they are spending to process your site, and as a consequence, they're more well, not necessarily lenient, but they're going to reward you additionally as a consequence.
A lot of people leave their category pages indexed, right? So
Yeah,
I'm going right. I'm going to poke the bear here because I know that we're going to get some comments on YouTube that are going to go both ways here. But why would I index my category page? And to your point, you don't like category page index. Why would I not index it? And sorry, but I have to ask the differences here between a no index and a no follow. And does any of this matter?
Yeah. So if, in my opinion, category pages, they serve a very valid purpose in terms of making it easier for Google to crawl the website. But I would much rather see that websites they improve their internal linking and solve the issue that way, because if depending on how you have the category pages set up, all of a sudden, I mean, in extreme scenarios, I've seen category and tag pages make up more than 50% of the overall indexable pages. So I'd much rather you try and improve crawlability through improved internal links. But if you are bent on keeping the category pages, I would very much encourage you to at least make sure that they show more posts per page, because by doing so, you're also going to be decreasing the overall number of necessary pages that are created as a consequence. So that's a little bit of a workaround, although that would not be my honestly recommendation. So, but I mean, I use Link Whisper, and I think it's great for the purpose of just making sure you don't have orphan pages, and making it super easy for you to see if you do have orphan pages and stuff. And look, the Search Console is there for a reason. So go through what you have indexed and honestly question yourself and ask yourself whether or not all the pages you're seeing, whether or not they do serve some purpose.
I like your take on that, so thank you for clarifying. I think there's something there for everyone. And certainly, I think the overarching opinion of better internal linking does minimize the need for that category page to deep link to some article you had from 3 years ago and keep it surfaced on the crawl depth there. I want to go to some of the Google Search Console stuff you mentioned, but I want to hold off. I have just kind of one more question around this bloat topic, right? You talked about tags and category pages sometimes being a high significant number of the total overall index pages. That's a problem. What do you think about some of these other pages that are a little thinner? So I'm thinking author pages. I'm thinking like a privacy page, a disclaimer page, or whatever, sitemaps, like these pages that don't really have a lot of unique content, but we need them, or we have them as part of the native taxonomy. Like, what do we do with those, and what do you see it being the right way forward with those pages?
I think they're important. even if they have basically duplicate content, I mean, you generate a privacy policy page and it's basically duplicate content because you're probably just using it or using some generator off of the internet to get them. But I think they're important in terms of proving that you're a valid website and some level of consideration for your user. I think they're, I mean, across the pages that I've, across the 1,000 pages in my Screaming Frog folder, what I commonly saw, even if I couldn't necessarily point to, you know, one or two other specific reasons why sites were doing pretty well, they had privacy policy, they had contact, they had about us, and I think it's just kind of about the bare minimum of like, hey, we're actually trying to prove we're a legitimate business here. So even, I mean, Google knows that how these pages are, or how at least the privacy policy and cookie policy and this stuff, how they're generated. So I don't think that you're going to get penalized on the basis of it. Also, just because in terms of the proportion of affected pages relative to the overall indexed amount of pages on your site is just going to be very, very small. So even if I'm not a big believer in EAT. I think it's way too easy to spoof. You can easily use an AI image generator in order to get a picture of someone, and you can then put up a nice little LinkedIn and link to it. And if you go in once or twice a week and start adding people, all of a sudden you have 200 connections. I think EAT is too easy to just spoof, that it can't be a significant ranking factor. But I'm kind of in line with Carl Roof in terms of, if it doesn't take you a whole bunch of time to do, why not do it? So that's despite me not believing in it, it's like, might as well do it, just in case it adds, a little bit of icing.
It's really funny to hear you talk about EAT, because we had Kyle on a couple months ago, well, maybe longer than a couple months ago now, and he kind of walked through all the different ways to check the box, as you say. And his case was, hey, every legitimate business needs to do these things, be a legitimate business. And so I even said at one point, I'm like, okay, so you got to be a real person. He's like, well, I didn't say you had to be a real person. It's very easy to not be a real person. I just said you had to do all these things. So.
A funny little side note here. I put up figured, why not test this stuff out? I put up LinkedIn with an AI image, so that I would have some level of validity answering hero queries. That LinkedIn profile actually gets invited to job interviews. So
I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
Well, I have EAT on my list, or EEAT, but before we move on from some of this indexation stuff, you talked about going into Google Search Console, and I wanted to circle back on this. You talked about how you haven't had many problems with sites experiencing indexing problems when you go into Search Console. A lot of people have. I wanted to get from someone who's an expert, because this is confusing. When you go in, and if you haven't done this, let me just give a little overview. If you go into Google Search Console and look at your website, which you kind of advise people to do, like, you need to have that. You need to understand what Google is indexing, what they aren't indexing, but they also have a whole area where they surface problems or things that they've identified as problematic and that you should fix and repair. They also have this interesting language they use around indexation. And could you help explain for people what it means, but also what to do about each of these? There's crawled, currently not indexed. There's discovered, currently not indexed. And then there's duplicate, and Google chose a different canonical URL. I know they're not all perfectly related, but can we just talk to people about where these are problems, how many of them are problems, and how to go about correcting some of these errors they'll see in GSC?
Sure. Crawl currently not indexed sometimes is a problem. Kind of depends on what's being reported. Feeds are usually reported in there. But if you look in the HTTP response header, I mean, WordPress makes sure to actually tell Google which kind of file it is. So feeds I would just ignore if they are showing up in that section. But if you start seeing that a bunch of the pages that you actually think should be indexed are showing up in crawl currently not indexed, that to me is an issue, because that to me means that Google actually went to the page and figured like, hey, for whatever reason, we just chose to not index this. So when that's the situation, I would look at whether or not you have generally quality issues. Discovered currently not indexed, that's a big red flag for me, because in order to even have stuff indexed in Google, you have to get it crawled. And so if Google's saying, hey, we know it's out there, we chose to not even go and visit it, like, that's a big red flag. So that I would be super concerned with. Duplicate, that's also a red flag. That could be issues with canonical tags. It could be you accidentally uploading the same thing twice, different URLs. So in that case, you really have to actually go in and inspect what's going on. So it really takes some digging into what's the root cause of the issue and what are the actual pages being served, and is there a reason they're not showing up? What could be the reason? Are we just missing the mark entirely on where this piece of content should be at? So it's honestly a range of issues that could be coming up from the indexing report.
If I were summarizing, it sounds like discovered, not indexed, is indicative of a probably a site-wide problem, a way that Google looks at your whole site, whereas crawled, not indexed, is perhaps a little bit more URL specific.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Let's see. So taking this indexation issue to a higher level, when you're evaluating your website and you're using different indexation tools and tips like what you've talked about, when do you make a case for deleting some of the content? You talked about how on your site, to recover it, you deleted, I think you said like 2/3 of the content along with some other things. What is a case, or what are the cases for someone to delete content versus update it versus, publish more content instead?
Yeah. Generally, my recommendation is always, if you keep publishing content, but you see both traffic and keywords falling in Ahrefs, then you need to figure out what's going on before you add more content, because clearly what you're doing is not helping you. It kind of sucks, but that's reality. I am of the belief that the stricter you can be about what you index, the better. So in my opinion, if a page is supposed to if it's supposed to drive organic traffic and it doesn't even get impressions, doesn't show up for any keywords in Ahrefs or in Search Console, then you need to either improve it or delete it. And look, I'm not gonna lie, I've definitely missed the mark myself on this a bunch of times. But with that said, continuously monitor content that you push out. Make it a habit a month in to actually go back and see how's the content doing. But on the question of should you improve or should you delete content, I think it's important to realize that if you have serious index bloat, it takes about 3 months to actually get these pages out of the index, whereas I can get pages re-indexed significantly faster. So let's let's say you have a site with about 600 pages indexed, and you know in the span of 2 months you can probably improve about 200 of these pages. If you remove the bottom third of it and you update the 200 pages that remain but are performing the worst, that, in my opinion, is going to be the way that you achieve results the absolute quickest, because you're taking advantage of removing parts of the content and thereby moving the goalpost on what's the average content quality. But at the same time, you're taking advantage of the fact that Google re-indexes stuff quicker than they remove it from the actual index.
That's good. That's a good practical way for people to use to think through and go about a large, I call it a large scale problem, but just, an overall site quality issue. With regards to indexation, last question on indexation. With regards to it as it relates to a new site, I mean, I think the most common DM I get on Twitter is, hey, why isn't this ranking? And my question, before I even look, is when did you publish it and how old is the site? And 90% of the time they come back and they said, I published it, a month ago and the site's 3 months old. I'm like, well, chances are it's, you're still in what we call the sandbox, these sorts of things. So before I kind of get in too far, like new sites, Google Sandbox, taking a long time for Google to start to give you some love. Any thoughts on that? Any tips for how to get out of that period faster, or how to get Google to crawl your site consistently quicker?
I believe that if you have a 3 months old website that still has indexing issues, it's a quality issue. But I believe what we think of as Sandbox is basically the lack of having been through a core update. And then it just takes time. I mean, you have to actually sit down and write content before Google starts rewarding you. Because when your site has 20 pages and your competitor has 2,000, it's like, well, there's kind of a reason why you're not being rewarded to the same extent they are. It's like, domain age may not be as such a ranking factor, but they accumulate some links and you don't have any links and you've not been through a core update and Google's not really assigned you the appropriate scores for how to reward the content and whatnot. So I really think Sandbox is just like a lack of a core update, generally speaking.
Okay, good take. Okay, good. I'll just tell them that from now on. Thomas said, core update. Hey, as we transition, I thought I'd get your take on structured data and schema. And if, again, I'm guessing you kind of check for these things or at least observe these things in your audits. And where does that play a role in site success these days?
I think it's good. I think it's good from the standpoint that you're making it easier for Google to process what's on the page. With that said, I don't think it's a long-term beneficial thing, or outside of the fact that in the SERPs you might gain a little bit more real estate, but I don't think it's a we're gonna reward the site with an additional 50% traffic. I do think you potentially just see a little bit quicker results, but the way I see it is structured data is very much a SEO kind of tool, and in Google's nature, they would love for hobbyists and experts to be the ones actually answering queries. So why should they reward a site with something that is so SEO specific as structured data, when a hobbyist might in fact provide a much better answer, but just not know that structured data exists?
Before we kind of start to wrap up here, I want to wade my way into another controversial topic, since we've already covered a couple of them, and get your take on this idea of topical authority, cornerstone content, supporting content, creating topical clusters. Is it needed? Is it not? It's certainly something that a lot of people talk about nowadays, and certainly this is the kind of stuff that has to rear its ugly head one way or the other in audits, or at least I'm hoping so. Maybe you can give us more definitive stances on this, and gives people some guidance on where to go with the topic.
My point of view is that that topical authority is not a thing, and I know a lot of your listeners are gonna hate me for it, but I'm gonna take the hate if it's needed. But with that said, I believe that you're basically assigned a certain score on a page that you're publishing on the basis of all the different things on your website, the average quality of your overall website. So, but with that said, I believe that internal links are just super important. So it's not that I'm discouraging, you writing clusters of content, because you put something up. Let's say you're assigned a score of 1 for that piece of content. When you put up a different topic and you link to that, some of the juice from that other page is then being passed on. So I believe it's more of a mathematical, link juice being passed between pages, more so than it necessarily being like, oh, you covered stuff in like fairly extensively on a top, or on like in a cluster of topics. I mean, I do believe that the quality of a specific page needs to be high, and you need to cover that in depth and stuff. But I have a site that publishes content in lots of different niches, and I'll put content up on one topic, and then I'll put content up on a vastly different topic, and I just don't see them actually being treated differently. And but I mean, I like the idea of topical authority because I think it kind of helps steer beginners in the right direction of like focusing more on quality and being aware of quality. And you're starting out and you spread too thin, and all of a sudden it's like nothing you put up is actually of quality. So I think that's more so why I push the message of like topical authority.
Maybe to close out, I want to ask you about internal links, because I haven't actually asked you about it, but you've brought it up a lot, right? When we were talking about category pages, you said, I'd prefer you do a better job of internal linking. When I ask about topical authority, you say, I just prefer you do a better job of internal linking. So let's talk about internal linking. What's the significance of it? It seems like it plays a really large role for you in what you see successful sites doing.
Yeah. I mean, for one, it shows consideration that you're trying to create a cohesive website. And in my opinion, that's what Google should ideally be rewarding, that everything should be about cohesiveness. So if within an article you can show, I'm writing this, but I also have other supporting stuff, that shows a level of consideration towards the content. So it's more along those lines, and over and over and over, I see sites doing well with internal links just tend to also do pretty well in the SERPs, and like that's more so my line of thinking on the topic.
Okay. Well, let's talk about your site audits, and let's talk about how what you do in a site audit. Both so if people are interested, they can reach out to you, but also so if people kind of want to learn more about what's important in an audit, they can kind of glean a bit about how you do them.
Yeah, I traditionally have a initial call with a customer or client I'm working with to learn more about the site, for a couple of different reasons. Give me a broader perspective on what's been going on, but also to sort of gauge where they're at in terms of white hat versus black hat, because it helps understand the person who's created the website and like what consideration for quality they've had. When I've had that, and I have a bunch of questions that I ask. Usually I just let them talk for a bit, and then we kind of discover a bunch of stuff that I probably naturally wouldn't have asked them about. And then I have questions that I cover. And then when I understand, where they're coming from and where they actually want to be going and how they best see that we reach the goal that they're trying to reach, that's when we say, okay, nice to meet you, and we wrap it up. And then I go back to the drawing board and actually look over all this stuff and, for one, look at their website, and then also compare it to some of the competitors. And then I have the findings session, which is usually about an hour. Talk about everything that came up. I have a spreadsheet that or a presentation that I go through with them, answer initial questions from them, walk them through my line of thinking, try and in case I feel they were substantially missing the mark on quality, I'm also trying to actually get buy-in from them, so that I can make sure it's not just an audit and then nothing happens. When that's been done, I usually say, hey, clearly everyone forgets stuff when you have a scheduled meeting. If you need help afterwards, I'm pretty generous with answering questions, and that's how I tend to do it. So it's there's a bunch of standardized stuff that I go through, and then also I try and make sure that I figure out what it is they want to achieve and help them best do so.
Not a one size fits all sort of approach, it sounds like. Where can people follow along with what you're doing or get in touch with you?
Twitter is the best channel. It's my username is Jepsen Thomas. That's Jepsen Thomas. So Danish spelling, and everyone always asks me to spell it. I don't have a newsletter. I don't really feel like taking on more projects right now. I might change my mind in the future, but Twitter is definitely the way to go about finding me.
Yeah, you're a good follow too. You publish a lot of really interesting kind of case studies or deep dives on different sites you're seeing, why they're working, what didn't work, that sort of stuff. So I can vouch for that. So, well, Thomas, that was fun. I mean, we could have gone on for another hour or so. So maybe down the road we'll do a part 2. But that was really fun. Thanks for coming on board and sharing your knowledge from all the different, near 1,000 websites that you've analyzed.
Yeah, definitely appreciate it. Just clarification, I'm not claiming I audited 1,000 sites, but I've at least run Screaming Frog on 1,000 sites.
Well, I mean, running Screaming Frog, that basically checks the box, doesn't it? Fair enough. Fair enough.
I would hope to set the bar a little bit higher.
A little bit higher. Good point. Yeah, that'd be setting the bar pretty low. So fair enough. Hey, thanks so much, Thomas, and look forward to connecting with you again soon. Appreciate you stopping by.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Today's episode is sponsored by Search Intelligence. Here's a short clip of Ferry from Search Intelligence showing you how their agency built digital PR links to a client's website.
Do you remember this campaign? It was all over the news. It is the most intelligent royal campaign. With over 100 links generated in the world's biggest online publications, this is one of the most viral PR campaigns of 2021. This is how we've done it. The methodology was pretty simple. We looked at the QS World University Rankings for the institutions attended by key members of the royal family to discover which royal is the brightest of all. Meghan Markle came out on top, followed by Kate Middleton and Prince William. We put these findings in a press release and sent it to mainstream media and journalists who write about royals. From Russia to the UK, the US, Vietnam and Japan, this story got massive coverage, landing over 100 links and created a massive buzz on social media. Simple research, but a great story that journalists love to write about. I hope this will put you on fire and will give you inspiration.
If you want similar link building PR campaigns for your website, head to search-intelligence.co.uk and get in touch with them now.